Now that the military action we just saw on Thursday night may have been coordinated with the Russians to throw sleuths like you off the scent.
Breaking news from San Bernardino, California this morning. Shooting at an elementary school appears to be a murder-suicide and much more.
All I heard was 4 bangs. It was crazy loud.
Oh my God! Look at what you're doing to him!
Most people don't realize that when you get on an airplane, you give up many of your constitutional rights. But this is way beyond anything that should happen.
Neil Gorsuch.
Judge Gorsuch.
I, Neil M. Gorsuch, do solemnly swear.
Okay, so everyone says Gorsuch. Everyone except that is for him.
I, Neil M. Gorsuch, do solemnly swear.
They asked this man 10,000 questions. No one bothered to ask what his name was.
Wait, so we've been wrong the whole time?
Gorsuch.
Gorsuch? Who pronounces it that way?
He does.
I guess he's right.
Then it sounds just like it's spelled. If you look at it on the paper, it's S-U-C-H.
But then you hear some people say Gorsuch. with no last
Now the
word.
record is straight.
Gorsuch.
Just call him Judge.
I don't think he wants that on the court.
Call him Justice now. He got the big job
this
yesterday.
Is true.
Hey, look who is in Brian's part of the curvy couch today. It's Ed Henry.
Good morning.
Apparently,
How do you feel sitting over there?
It feels great. You know, I saw Brian with his brothers yesterday. I guess maybe they went out late last night, the three of them. He said, forget about it, call Ed.
no, actually, he was flying somewhere, and they didn't have enough chairs on the plane for the trip back.
Wait, that was
dragged him
Brian in the
off.
video? No, we're going to talk about that video. It is
That's got you fired up. Lots of people are talking about that this morning.
That's right. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson bracing for a frosty reception as he heads from Italy to Moscow today.
This is brand new questions surface about Russia's involvement in the Syrian chemical attack.
Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen live in D.C. with all the details. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Ed, Ainsley, and Steve, with Secretary of State Tillerson soon to land in Moscow for his first trip there as America's top diplomat. Allies of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, including the Russians, the Iranians, and the terrorist group Hezbollah, have released a rare joint statement warning Washington that Thursday's U.S. airstrike on a Syrian airfield, quote, oversteps all red lines. We will react firmly to any aggression against Syria and to any infringement of red lines. The U.S. knows very well, the group added ominously, our ability to react. Now, ahead of Secretary Tillerson's G7 meetings in Italy, the Russian embassy in London had tweeted on Sunday morning, if G7 ultimatum to Russia brings us to real war, what is your trust in Donald Trump as a wartime leader and British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson as his lieutenant? Then, yesterday morning, the same Russian embassy in London tweeted, the right time to watch Dr. Strangelove by the great Stanley Kubrick. The post included this iconic image taken from the Cold War-era cinema classic of a nuclear bomb hurtling toward its target.
I'm a little concerned that things are moving a little too much back toward the Cold War, but it certainly puts the lie to any suggestion that somehow President Trump is Vladimir Putin's patsy.
The White House said Thursday's airstrike had destroyed more than 20% of Assad's fixed-wing aircraft and dismissed Russian claims that the U.S. had moved the world closer to a real war in the Mideast.
If you look at who's not with us, it's a pretty small group, and not a group that too many people are looking to bring on board. I mean, you've got Iran, Syria, North Korea, and Russia on one side of this. That's a pretty small group.
Only Henry Kissinger is believed to have spent more face time with Vladimir Putin than Rex Tillerson, of course, who spent all that time with the Russian president due to his own role as the chairman of ExxonMobil. But as of now, the Kremlin is saying that Tillerson is only scheduled to meet with his Russian counterpart, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Back to you guys in New York.
Well, let's see what happens. All right, James Rosen, thank you very much. By the way, we should point out yesterday, midday, the Associated Press came out with an electrifying story that the Russians knew about the Syrian chemical attack in advance because they said there was a drone there watching people go into the hospital. Next thing you know, a Russian plane, they don't know if it was operated by the Syrians or the Russians, tried to attack the hospital.
And maybe cover up the chemical weapons attack.
Exactly.
U.S. officials are cautioning that they haven't fully confirmed that. They don't have the intelligence to back up that AP report. However, very tantalizing, as you say, and it's fascinating because how many months do Democrats spend saying Donald Trump in the campaign, in the transition, and then here in the first 70, 80 days saying he's too close to Putin, he's too close to Russia. And now when you listen to James' report, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is going to Moscow and has some tough talk for them, at the least. There's also, it looks like, action backing it up. And Putin is so mad, he doesn't want to meet with the Secretary of State. He's saying, I'm not going to meet with you.
Well, if you believe that, or maybe this is all just a cover story.
Really?
Right?
Well, Democrats are saying that there's still that bromance between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. And I was reading all these articles this morning and thinking, can't be farther from the truth. We bombed an ally of Russia. Assad's family has been backed by the Russian government for decades. Vladimir Putin will not meet with Rex Tillerson, as you were saying. Russia and Iran are warning that they will respond with force if this happens again. And Russia blamed the rebels, even though the chemicals were dropped by the planes that are owned or are managed by Assad and his government.
So that doesn't fit the narrative that Democrats have been pushing for the last few months.
That's right. That Trump is in bed with the Russians, and so that's why I said a cover story. Tucker last night had on a Democrat from Massachusetts, a U.S. congressman by the name of Seth Moulton. And what Congressman Moulton was suggesting is, no, it's just a hypothesis, an alternative hypothesis.
He never anything to back it up.
Right, exactly. It's a conspiracy theory.
But because he wants to get out from underneath this cloud that Trump is in bed with the Russians, maybe Trump attacked Syria to throw them off.
And say, I'm not really close to Russia.
Right.
How irresponsible would that be? Listen to what he said with Tucker last night.
It's one thing to say, okay, members of the Trump administration met with Russian officials. That kind of thing happens a lot. Maybe it's ominous, maybe it's not.
Well, and to lie about it. And that's an important thing.
That's right. You're saying now that the military action we just saw on Thursday night may have been coordinated with the Russians to throw sleuths like you off the scent. That appears to be what you're saying. And that just seems like a huge conspiracy to me.
Well, it's a conspiracy if it's a conspiracy, but the reality is I'm just giving it to you as a plausible explanation. No, and that's why I said I'm not going to confirm it. Look, I know you would love for me to say that and confirm it. I'm just saying that there are people who think that. There are Americans who think that.
Who are they?
Who are they? And he gave absolutely no information and to back up this, no evidence. What's interesting is he's not the first person on cable news who has suggested this. He's just the first U.S. Member of the U.S. Congress who we have heard suggest
should have some facts to back up those kinds of theories, you would think.
Well, you would think so. All right. Also yesterday, Sean Spicer mentioned that if there was another chemical attack, Syria could wind up getting hit again, which calls into question the mainstream media and
the whole red line.
It used to be in the press room at the White House. You know, what about the red line? What is the red line for this administration? Forget about they had a red line in the last administration that they never actually enforced.
Right.
Here's Sean Spicer tangling with the correspondent from ABC on the red line.
Red line for this White House chemical warfare is conventional warfare enough to get the president to go further there than this White House has gone before?
I think the president has been very clear that there are a number of lines that were crossed last week. He's not going to sit down. We saw that in the last administration. They drew these red lines, and then the red lines were run over. I don't think you're going to see the same play. I think what not just Syria, but the world saw last week is a president that is going to act decisively and proportionally and with justification when it comes to actions like that. I mean, and I will tell you, the answer is that if you gas a baby, if you put a barrel bomb in to innocent people, I think you will see a response from this president. That is unacceptable.
The majority of Americans, according to a CBS poll, are in favor of that. They're saying good for him. Long gone are the days, 8 years of just talking. Mm-hmm. When you do this, when you gas children, and we've warned you not to do it, we've warned you that there is a red line, then you can expect a Tomahawk missile in your face.
Well, Sean Spicer laid out that line very clearly. There was no, fumbling around. You gas a baby, as you say, you're going to face force. And what's interesting is we talked about this media narrative about Russia and President Trump and how maybe that's coming apart, so they don't know what to do. There was another narrative, of course, president's unstable, he's crazy, you don't know what he's going to do, he's not going to show leadership on the world stage. Brit Hume last night pointed out, wait a second, he's not only showing leadership, but some of our enemies are saying, whoa, what do we do next? Watch.
Think of the other people around the world who are now wondering what Trump might do next. That applies in China, that applies in Iran, and it certainly applies in North Korea. And that, introducing that element of doubt and wondering in the minds of these malefactors around the world, I think is a useful thing, even if he never has to do it again, or even if he never does do it again. I thought it was a useful Now we don't thing. know what Trump will do.
Exactly. We won't know what Trump will do. And you hear some of the mainstream media commentators and pundits go, you know, there is no Trump doctrine. We can't figure out what Donald Trump stands for as president of the United States.
He hasn't even been in office for 100 days.
Well, we do know it does, because it's not appeasement, and it's not nation building. So what is it? Well, it looks like it's kind of a hybrid. But nonetheless, I think the key to regarding Donald Trump and his approach to international affairs, he's not going to show all the cards on the table.
Right. He said that on the campaign trail. People appreciate that. We don't want the enemy to know what we're going to do next.
He said that over and over. You're right.
Absolutely.
And he's
we were all
actually
shocked on Thursday night when this happened. We weren't expecting this, and it happened 2 days after that chemical attack. I thought it sent a great message, and they better be grateful that all 6 of their airfields were not bombed.
Right.
And they did get a warning. Russia got a warning because we had to do that because of laws with the airspace, so that they wouldn't.
And you saw these reports that 20% of that airfield is just completely decimated.
Right.
It's unusable for the Syrian military.
Plus, there's a story on Drudge this morning about how the Chinese are moving, I think, 150,000 troops toward North Korea in anticipation that Donald Trump might strike North Korea, and then the North Koreans go yelling, "We're out of here!"
And want to go to China.
Whereas before they weren't doing that because they knew
it's all because
it was just a threat and nothing was really going to happen.
He hasn't put all the cards on the table, which you don't want.
Well, there's a lot more happening around the world. That's why we have Heather Childers here. Good morning.
Hey, Heather. Good morning. Good morning to you and to everyone at home. We do begin with a Fox News alert for you at this hour. 8 suspected terrorists under arrest in connection with the deadly subway bombing in Russia. Officials reportedly catching members of the group with a large amount of weapons and ammunition in 2 different cities. Now, last week's bombing killed 13, sent countless others running for their lives in Russia's 2nd largest city. The bombers have been identified as a Kyrgyz-born man who may have ties to ISIS. Now, so far, no one has claimed responsibility for the attack. And to another Fox News alert for you, North Korea now promising, quote, catastrophic consequences if the United States continues to make military moves. Now, this comes after the USS Carl Vinson was deployed to waters off the Korean peninsula, infuriating North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But the Trump administration wanted to send more than just a message to the rogue nation, which has been using the U.S. strike in Syria as justification for their nuclear missile program. And then a typical Monday morning turning into a horrific ordeal, a tragic murder-suicide. Did you hear about this unfolding inside an elementary school classroom, claiming the lives of a teacher and her 8-year-old special needs student? Some new questions arising this morning as to how exactly 53-year-old Cedric Anderson was able to walk into a full classroom with a loaded revolver, killing his wife, Karen Smith, before turning the gun on himself. A 9-year-old girl also injured. And the images you can see here, they're haunting as these young students, can you imagine, crying, holding hands, the teachers rushing them out to safe zones. The school is now shut down until Thursday.
I can't think right now. I'm sorry, I can't think right now. But other than that, that's all I know.
Have you been in contact at all with your child?
No, I have not. I haven't. I know. I called. I went to your door.
Well, police say that Anderson has a history of domestic violence. According to social media, the two were married back in January, but they separated last month. And those are a look at your headlines so far. We'll continue to follow the news for you.
All right.
Terrible
Thanks,
story.
Heather.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Coming up on this Tuesday, it's a story everyone has been talking about. A United Airlines passenger dragged off the plane by the authorities. So who is right? Who is wrong?
That's the Fox producer talking to the GOP chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Devin Nunes, temporarily stepping away from the Russia investigation. This after the liberal MoveOn.org filed an ethics complaint and a petition calling for Nunes to be ousted. But our next guest calls the whole thing frivolous. Bloomberg View columnist Eli Lake has been all over this story from the start. He joins us live now. What do you think, Eli, about MoveOn.org entering the fray after all of the back and forth we've already seen?
Well, what we're seeing now, because you're now seeing other groups, calling on Adam Schiff to recuse himself and to look at, to file these ethics charges on what I think are totally frivolous issues of revealing so-called classified information, is the abuse of the Office of Congressional Ethics and how they can take complaints from any partisans on right or left, and it really kind of distracts from serious ethics violations and the serious work of the Ethics Committee, when you now have an investigation into what I think is a total distraction, which is, you know, so-called revealing classified information, when the key thing to remember here is the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, did not reveal sources and methods on how this information was monitored or the targets of who was monitored. So what are we talking about?
I think you make a great point, and our viewers are watching this. They've seen this poll going around and around in Washington, and they want to know, rather than what's happening with Nunes or Schiff, the Republican or the Democrat, the top ones on that panel, what is really happening with the Russia investigation, Eli? Are we any closer to figuring out just how much influence they had on the last election? Because I thought that was the point.
I thought there was a very good hearing about 2 weeks ago in the Senate Intelligence Committee where they had kind of experts on this who talked about another angle of it, which is the Russian propagation of fake news and how it was very targeted to geographic areas. I hadn't heard that before, and it was really laid out pretty well. But here's the problem. The FBI is investigating this. There may be a criminal component of it, and it's so serious that it might involve, you know, people in Trump's orbit. At least that's what James Comey said last month. If that's the case, then you really do run into problems if you have two congressional oversight committees calling witnesses that potentially the FBI would be calling. And that's a potential for a lot of problems in terms of the justice process. So my view is that there's a lot to investigate in how the Russians did it, but the super red-hot issue of Trump's connection to all of this, which is clearly what the Democrats want to make it, is something that should be left for now to the FBI, and then have the committees do all the oversight, and also look at the politicization of surveillance as well.
And basically stick to the facts, as you say, rather than these partisan sideshows, and actually get to the facts. Eli Lake, we appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, immigrants in the country illegally about to be deported. So what are they doing in their free time? Suing the government. That's right, suing the government. The political left upset about the names of Tomahawk missiles and Apache helicopters because they're offensive. Really? This U.S. Army captain says it's not only ridiculous, it's dangerous. Quick headlines. More than 60,000 illegal aliens suing a Colorado detention center, claiming they are being forced to do house chores. The ICE detainees say it's unjust to be paid a daily allowance of $1. Lawyers arguing the voluntary work program is authorized by Congress, folks. And immigrants behind bars are making up a huge chunk of American crime. Pew Research shows half of all federal arrests in 2014 were for immigration-related offenses. A decade earlier, those same offenses accounted for just 28% of federal arrests. And environmentalists say the president's border wall hurts jaguars. They claim it would harm their habitat and block migration from Mexico to Arizona. The only problem? Jaguars don't live in that area anymore. Only 2 wild ones have been spotted there since 1996. Go figure, Steve.
All right, Ed, thank you. Following the U.S. missile strikes against Syria last week, the editor-in-chief of Mother Jones, the publication, Clara Jeffrey, tweeted out that the missiles are called Tomahawks must enrage a lot of Native Americans.
Wow. Is this the sort of political correctness that is spilling into our military? And if so, just how dangerous could this be for our troops?
Joining us right now is one person who says it is, former U.S. Army captain and author of a brand new book. It's called Dog Company, a true story of American soldiers abandoned by their high command. Roger Hill. Roger, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of that? This person from Mother Jones said, Tomahawk and tying it to Native Americans.
Well, on the whole, it's just kind of a frustrating comment to hear because I think there are so many other newsworthy items worth reporting on or commenting on, especially for a person in her position. But to your larger point, I do think that PC culture has certainly crept into our society to an unprecedented level, to our government, and now even our military. And that is a cause of concern for me. I believe that our rules of engagement are so politically driven these days that it's unnecessarily endangering our men and women in uniform overseas.
You speak from experience. Tell us your personal story about rules of engagement. What happened to you?
Yeah, sure. So my first sergeant and I, Tommy Scott, led a heavy weapons company in Afghanistan in 2008, 2009, and we were in a very violent province in eastern Afghanistan. It always seemed like the enemy was one step ahead of us, and we found out why. Through the aid of a counter-intel team, we discovered that we had 12 spies working on our base, one of which was my personal translator, believe it or not.
So they were just watching, they were listening, and then
reporting,
directly to the enemy.
They were,
Okay, so when you found that out, what'd you do?
Well, we were also receiving credible intelligence that we had a large-scale attack coming our way to our base. And my battalion had failed to pick these spies up after repeated requests. So we decided to interrogate them ourselves. That interrogation led to an investigation to a hearing, and then several of us being drummed out of the military.
Were you not supposed to interrogate them?
No, well, the interrogation also consisted of me firing a weapon into the ground to make a group of detainees speak. We needed some time-sensitive information out of them, which we got, but that was considered over the top, and the command even pursued war crimes charges at that time.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did that happen? I mean, I understand maybe one spy. That would be awful in and of itself. But to have so many spies, is that a result of this PC culture and all the red tape that the military has to deal with?
In part, I think we've got lots of work programs over in Afghanistan as a way to provide outreach to the local community. That doesn't excuse the fact that the government should have fully vetted these people, especially a translator who has access to the sensitive information that they do. But it happens a lot. I mean, if you dig into the headlines, you'll see that stuff hidden, you know, several pages back in the newspapers that it's happening and has happened
There's a new sheriff in town. What's your message for him? How can we protect our troops?
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate that. So our rules of engagement have been very politically driven, especially over the past 8-10 years. And so before we consider moving into another conflict, and without me rendering an opinion on what it is we should or shouldn't be doing overseas, we need to take a hard look at our rules of engagement because they are getting our people killed and injured unnecessarily.
And because you didn't follow them, you were drummed out.
True. And, you know, there are a lot of people who have dealt with this sort of thing. So I'm not just speaking for the men and families of Dog Company or for myself, but a number of folks in uniform have dealt with this, especially over the last several years.
You were just trying to save lives.
Accomplish my mission and take care of my men, which is a part of my mission as well. Yeah.
But in the long run, you got the short end of the stick.
Sure. Fair enough.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do for America.
Yeah.
We love our troops.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
The book is
Army
called
Captain Roger Heels.
Dog Company is the name of the book. All right.
Captain Hill, thank you so much.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
Well, look at this video. It is unforgettable. So what do you think about that man being dragged off a United Airlines flight?
That's right. And students on one college campus fear Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A threatens their safe space. We're not going to ask the captain about it. I think we know where he feels, what he feels about it, right?
United Airlines facing growing backlash over that horrifying video. It shows a passenger being dragged off with a bloody face of an overbooked flight.
But the United CEO doubling down in an email to employees, slamming the passenger as disruptive and belligerent.
Oh, my. Clayton Morris joining us live with the latest. What a story.
It's a video everyone is talking about this morning. The scene is stunning. That passenger ripped out of his seat, dragged down the aisle, and off of a United Air jet, refusing to give up his paid-for seat, by the way.
Just kill me. Kill me. Kill me.
This morning, a Chicago airport security officer involved now on paid administrative leave, but worldwide outrage intensifying with people across the country asking how and why it got to this point in the first place. United says it started with a crew transport issue. So here's the deal. 4 of these seats were needed for employees to travel from Chicago to Louisville so that they could get on another flight. $800 in vouchers were offered to some, folks to get off the plane, but no one took them up on it. They're like, I need to get home. So 4 passengers were chosen at random, including this guy, a 69-year-old man in the video who said he was a doctor and had patients to treat. And when he refused to get up, flight attendants called in security.
He was unconscious. The United staff that was, they had to clear the seats for, they came on the plane and they were berated by the passengers on the plane, as you can imagine. A lot of people were saying, you should be embarrassed for working for this company. You should be ashamed of yourself.
So if that wasn't bad enough, it's gotten worse now because United CEO Oscar Munoz sending an email to employees saying he has their back and is only apologizing for the airline overbooking. No direct apology to the passenger whose face is all bloodied. Instead, Munoz is slamming the man as disruptive and belligerent. You may remember United is the same airline behind the leggings fiasco, and now this is the latest incident. It has some travelers calling for a boycott this morning, saying they're not going to fly United anymore.
I think we know the law is on United's side. I think perhaps the bigger, and I had heard they had offered up to $1,000 per person.
I did too, yeah.
And they didn't show up. I would have suggested, $2,000, $3,000. It would have been far greater to spend that money than this worldwide.
Here's the thing: they overbooked. They overbooked
all the time.
They shouldn't do that. Right. This has happened to someone that I know.
Well, they do it every day.
And you have to listen to what the police officers are saying. This guy stood his ground. He said, "I'm a doctor. I have patients in Louisville. The next flight was out the next day in the afternoon, and he said, I need to see my patients." But they shouldn't overbook. And I agree with you. They should have offered, you know what?
Just keep going.
And I also read that everyone got on the plane, and then they said, we need some people to get out.
Yeah. Well, people are weighing in all morning, and you can do it, friends at FoxNews.com. Layla on Facebook. He paid for a ticket for a specific time, and he had the right to refuse to get off the plane. Why would United employees, their job be more important than this man's job to get home?
Right.
Because they were going to have to cancel the flight. And Mike on Facebook says all the things that could have been done are debatable. Refusing to get off the plane when told by the police is not optional or up for debate. The other thing is it was a misstep on the part of United, ultimately Republic, I think they operated that particular airline, to put him on the plane to start with, if they knew it was overbooked on the computer.
And there's hotels problem, too. We were talking about this in the hallway, which is, you're going to give them a voucher, but then you don't give hotel vouchers.
They should give you your money back for your ticket.
Sleep on the floor of the airport.
You're going to pay $300 or so at a hotel for the night.
That's true. You should give them money back for the ticket, pay for their hotel, pay for their food, and then offer them like $2,000, $3,000 vouchers.
Yeah.
Someone will take you up on that because people like free stuff.
And to your point, now it's more of a PR nightmare.
Yeah.
Absolutely. $3,000.
They wish the leggings
thing
was the only thing.
Now they're facing probably a lawsuit, and then everyone out there is a lot of people are boycotting United.
We've got some breaking news on Syria right now, actually.
That's right. So let's roll the animation. Rex Tillerson, who is in transit now to Moscow, said this just a moment ago regarding the Assads and their grip on power in the country of Syria.
It's clear to all of us that the reign of the Assad family is coming to an end. But the question of how that ends and the transition itself could be very important, in our view, to the durability, the stability inside of a unified Syria, and its stability and durability of the outcome going forward. So that's why we are not presupposing how that occurs. But I think it is clear that we see no further role for the Assad regime longer term.
Suggesting squeeze him out.
Right. But does that mean more U.S. military action? The Wall Street Journal has the lead story. U.S. hints at tougher stance on Syria. Is it just rhetoric? Is it more military action coming from the Trump administration? Or is this just public pressure with allies like Britain to get the Assad family out? And remember, Assad's father was in power before he was. And I think the other point he makes about stability is very important, because you may want to get Assad out. That may be a good objective short term, but long term, who takes over? Is ISIS going to expand their power in Syria? It's a mess there right now. If he leaves, could it get worse?
We're going to be talking about that. We have another report in about 20 minutes about that very topic, so stick around for that. In the meantime, let's hand it over to Heather Childers, who has